Alrighty. All right. Welcome everybody to this edition of Expert Witness with Doug Miner and Stephen Palmieri. We come to you twice a month in this group here to bring you the content that you're just not going to get elsewhere. Feel free to comment down below. We are here for you guys. So for those of you who don't know, Doug Miner is a qualified expert witness, and looks like he just kind of blew himself out of the meeting, so hopefully he'll be able to join us back here. Doug Miner is a qualified expert witness, and here he's coming back here. So Doug blew himself out. He's back here. Doug is a qualified expert witness. He is not qualified to handle clearly StreamYard or any of these live streams, but he is qualified to sit in the court cases and give his expert opinion. He started off as a CRO. The next thing you know, an attorney hired him one time to write an opinion, and then he became a professional expert. So, and of course, for those of you guys as credit repair professionals, if you can think about your case, your client file like an expert, that's going to be setting you light years ahead of the competition. So, Doug Miner, what is going on in your world? Say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Everything's good in my world, and just excited to kind of talk about some of the things today in the show. And I'm kind of remembering back to the last show too as well. So, but obviously this show we want to kind of move forward and see what we can do to help the CROs that are on the call.
Awesome. So Marianne says hi from Kentucky. We love you too, Marianne. So awesome. Yeah. So, all right. So what's been kind of going on? What's the trends you're seeing? In kind of the expert witness cases. What are you seeing sliding across your desk these days? Expert and credit related.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some of like we were talking about before the show, right? I think some of the things that maybe aren't thought about, but just things that are on the forefront of my mind in dealing with the cases that I do, and then being CROs. I think we have to make the correlation between part of being an expert is staying up, being current, and like you do in your pre-lit courses, and staying on these calls with you, and whether it's with some of the other shows that you do and so forth. But then also remember that when you're working in litigation or cases, there's a lot of times that whatever the problem was that occurred or brought a case to litigation in the first place may have happened, heck, I don't know, it could have been 2012, it could be 2017, and then the damage or the information that you're reviewing may not have been could have been from 2016. So it's not necessarily that absolute current information is going to translate to every single case that you work on. Sometimes you're going to have to look back, and so, like what I do, I'll have to sometimes go back and look back at a previous, let's say, Metro 2 format guide from 2015 or 2017 to get the right, or even look back at some of the updated information from the CDIA on the frequently asked questions and so forth, as they modify them for the particular case that you may be working on. I bring that up. I had a bankruptcy case, and there had been some changes and the wording in the Metro 2 format from when the case initially had started, and then during the time when the damages were happening. So there was some different. So it can get fairly complex as far as the timing of these things is concerned. But I think the bottom line is, like, for your people, just to stay current, stay on these calls, stay up to date, but also understand you may need to keep a database of information like you have on your site. You'll be able to go back and research things,
So let's talk a little bit about this. You're talking about the CDIA, that's the Consumer Data Industry Association. That's the trade association for the credit bureaus. And they're the association that basically owns the rights to Metro 2, which is the industry standard data format. And that's really what Metro 2 is. You use it from an expert witness perspective. I mean, there's a lot of people in this industry who have different interpretations of how they use it. But, you use it in a way very similar to how I use it, which is, the way that the industry designed it, which is it's an industry standard. And you use that to be able to kind of point back to the facts. And, so as far as that, the benefit of the industry standard is that everything is supposed to be uniform reporting. And there's a manual called the Credit Reporting Resource Guide. That's kind of what you were referring to. That has the full Metro 2 format, the rules, the definitions, how everything should be reporting in there. And so let's kind of jump in a little bit on that, because that really ties directly to our listeners. I mean, if we're trying as CROs to dispute accuracy of credit, I mean, there's no stronger position to hold than to say, well, your own industry standard, this doesn't conform to your own industry standards. So let's talk a little bit about how you pull in Metro 2, continuing a little bit on further from what you were talking about. How do you pull in Metro 2, for some of this expert witness work that you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes around, it can happen in different forms, obviously, but I guess the first sort of example comes to mind is, let's say you have an ACDV form from a dispute process that had gone on, and you're able to go back and look at the codes that they're using, the timeframes that they're using it, and then go back to your credit reporting resource guide and say, okay, well, was this the correct information to be reporting at that time, right? Are they using the correct codes in the right fields? And I hear you talk about that a lot as far as the disputes that these people are sending out, right? Are you using the right codes at the right time, and are you questioning the right fields and codes? So that's kind of where it comes up,
Well, and that's a big thing, because a lot of times when we look at the credit reports, I mean, like when I first got in the industry in 2008 and 2009, when I first bought the Metro 2 manual, back when it was a lot easier to buy it and they would mail it to you. There was a chapter in there. There's a chapter in that manual that has all the data fields. And I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, I mean, why, when I get the reports from the bureaus, those little paper template reports that they mail you, why do they all look different? I mean, not that the format, like how it's laid out, is different, but like literally the names of the fields that they give you are different, and some of them don't give you certain fields. I mean, if you look at a Capital One account in all three bureaus, it's different. The names of the fields are different, like the data itself is different. Sometimes some of them give you fields and others don't. And I remember scratching my head and asking myself, I mean, how does this make any sense if it all originated from Capital One and they put the data into their system conforming to the format? They hit submit one time and they push that one batch of data to all the bureaus. And if the bureaus are supposed to conform to maximum possible accuracy, why do the paper reports not appear to be so maximum when it comes to the accuracy? And so you're talking about, the data format, the data fields. So part of it is us as CROs having an understanding of how it should report, which is looking at the Metro 2 manual and understanding the data format. Here's all the fields and what they're supposed to do. And then figuring out how to read a credit report, right? Because if you look at the report and you can't really figure out how to map out the data from one bureau to the other, or from that bureau to Metro 2, you don't really know what you're looking at. So, so just as much as kind of Doug is saying, looking at the data, that's what we can do when we get the credit reports. We want to look at the data. We want to figure out, like, what is this credit report really trying to communicate to me with respect to how the data originated, right? So, I mean, we like to get kind of technical on it, because, I mean, we're doing credit repair and we're looking, well, I mean, I say technical, but it's not really. I mean, it's supposed to be maximum possible accuracy, and they're database companies. I mean, so, I mean, I don't even really like the term technical inaccuracy, because, I mean, it's if it's wrong, it's wrong. I mean, they're database companies. I mean, that's all they're dealing with is data. But when you look at it, I mean, are you looking more at things that are just kind of like grossly wrong, or are you looking at things that are maybe kind of just technically wrong, but not really like by grossly wrong, I mean things like, well, this is showing like clearly this is a fraudulent trade line on my credit report, and I'm the victim of fraud, and I've put them on notice, and you guys refuse to remove it, versus like, well, I mean, you failed to correct it from 60 days to 30 days late. So what kind of things do you generally look at from your perspective as an expert with respect to how you use Metro 2?
Yeah, it's kind of all of those things and all of the above, and always unique to whatever the situation is. And I think keeping in mind that each case is different, but then also the type of information that you're given to evaluate a situation is always different. Meaning, let's say in one case you might have a tri-merge residential, tri-merge mortgage credit report from 4 years ago, and then intermingled with that report you're given a Credit Karma or some consumer website printout, and then you'll get a screenshot of a score from 3 different time frames that the consumer involved in the case has given you. And so you have to assimilate all of this information and data into evaluating the claims that are being made in the case. And so does this information support that claim? Is it harmful to the claim? But probably more importantly, and this is where I think the CROs that watch this type of information have to really come into their own, in that you're dealing with consumers on a stressful, difficult situation and trying to help them to improve their credit and get to a desired outcome. Well, when you deal with consumers on a daily basis, you're not going to communicate to them in such a way that oh, here, you need to use an XB code, or this XC code is going to show up after a dispute or when it's done. You're not going to talk to them like that, right? It may be, look, this information needs to be corrected, and so it's a great training ground to be able to communicate technical information, but so that everyone can understand. Meaning,
let me chime in on that actually for you, because that's kind of important, because a lot of people kind of have this perception. I was going to say misconception, but it's technically not inaccurate per se, but this perception that Metro 2 is these quote unquote codes, like you were just saying, XB and all these things. But what I want people to kind of visualize is that so Metro 2 is a data format. And so if you think of your keyboard, you've got like, if you've got a software or something, you can kind of like, there's long commands and then there's shortcut commands. So you can hit like, F5 will make something happen, or you can do some other command for that. So what Doug was saying, like XB code, so when these people, the data furnishers, are using Metro 2, there's like little codes that they can type in as short keys, but it actually indicates a plain English word or phrase, right? Which actually is what you see on the credit report. So like the XB code is a code for a certain type of in dispute, which is why when you see your credit report, you're never going to see these quote unquote codes. So I think it's just important for people to understand that, like, let's not get intimidated by Metro 2. Yeah, there's these codes. And even when you look at the manual, it shows you the codes, which are just like the short keys to enter whatever the plain English actual data that it is. So to your point, Doug, we can talk to our clients, and we don't need to kind of get all in the weeds with them and confuse them with codes and things. If we understand what the plain English words and phrases of what credit reporting is supposed to be, what is your balance? What type of account status is this thing really? Is it really charged off? Is it repossession? Was it repossessed? Did they repossess it? What happened? And so let's not get bogged down on the code so much from credit repair perspective as what is the code actually trying to say, which is what we end up seeing on the reports anyway. It's just as actionable. So go ahead, Doug. Go ahead, take it back. I wanted to just kind of jump in there and throw that little clarification in for everybody.
Yeah, I think part of where I was going with that was in sort of trying to give the credit repair organizations a sort of a thumbs up, is that you're dealing with consumers, and so you have to make all this information understandable to the regular person, right? And it's the same thing in expert work. We have to understand and know and be able to support our opinions and know the technical knowledge. But at the end of the day, or sort of one of the bottom lines, is if you keep in mind that you need to be able to communicate this information so that a regular person can understand it. And so it's that two sides of it. Yes, you need to be able to explain the technical sides of it and write it in your report, and if asked to communicate it, be able to give, let's say, a technical answer. But if let's say you're testifying at a trial, you need those 13 or 12 jurors, the judge, you need all these people to be able to understand what you're communicating. So it's a way of this is my way of saying, hey, if you're a credit repair organization and you deal with consumers, you already communicate, most likely there's a high probability, speaking in expert speak, right? Probabilities and so forth. There's a high I'm going to assume that there's a high probability that whoever's working as a credit repair organization is going to be able to communicate to a consumer what's going on with their credit report and what happens with their score and how much money that may cost them or how much money they could save if they were able to achieve a certain outcome with their credit, right?
It's almost a statistical certainty is what you're testifying to, that we can talk to our clients and have those conversations. Is that Mr. Miner, is that what you're trying to suggest to the jury over here? That as professionals?
I'm gonna, yeah, without knowing everybody and all information involved, I would say there's a high probability that what I've just said would be hold true under scrutiny. How's that?
You throw in those little disclaimers and stuff like that. So listen, we got a lot of love coming in. We got, and of course, Aldiva, Ali, she's over in your home state of California.
All right.
Ali, how are you? Hello, boys. That's right. How are you doing, young lady? Good to see you here. We got love coming in everywhere, all sorts of states here. We've got Louisiana, Kentucky, California. So yeah, guys, I mean, drop your questions down here. Obviously, we're here for you guys. I mean, what's on your mind, right? Have you ever, figured, wondered like, hey, how can you take all the knowledge that you're learning and take it to the next level? I mean, Doug just started off as a CRO many years ago. Well, he started off as a mortgage person, then became a CRO, and then by pure accident, he became an expert, and now he does that full time. I mean, which is a really cool thing because you help, right? We all like to help people. That's generally why we do this. You just kind of have a different, you play a different position in the ball game. You now kind of like are on the legal side, supporting the cases, which really is super important because I mean, a lot of these consumer lawyers are good, but they're not like experts with every nuance. And that's where you as an expert kind of comes in. Maybe we could talk about that for a minute too, kind of what, because we all can be experts. We all have some sort of experience, especially as we run our business year after year after year. So maybe let's just talk a little bit just on a high level. We've got a lot of new folks here watching. I mean, what does an expert do? What does an expert witness do? I mean, some people are probably thinking, this guy sounds super intelligent, but I don't really understand like how he fits into the whole thing here. So, kind of high level, how do you plug in to the ecosystem here, Doug?
The ecosystem of the credit repair organizations and in relation to being an expert or
just the whole consumer protection, right? So they send the client off to the attorney, and then the attorney is like, okay, I really think I kind of like this, but I need some more ammunition. I need somebody that I need my little pony that I can do the dog and pony show up in front of the judge and testify. That's where you kind of come in on certain occasions.
I'm trying to think. Okay, so it makes me think of a recent situation that I had where when you're taught or you take a expert witness training course, kind of like the one that I do for people, I'm going to tell you about situations where when an attorney calls you on an initial call for their case, you want to give them your time and attention, right? But there's this fine line between saying not enough and saying maybe too much. I tend to sort of side on giving them as much information as I can so that they understand that I'll be a good expert. But I had a recent case where the attorney had called me on a case a few times and kept wanting more and more information, right? Which kind of it was getting to be, it could have been 3 hours of my time, which is a lot before somebody's even retained me. But what I figured out through those, let's say, 3 hours of conversation he had with me, he had drafted some sort of declaration. I wouldn't say a declaration. I forget the exact word he used. Some sort of memorandum or memo for the courts and the judge to review. But in order for him to do that, he needed to designate an expert. And so one of the kind of cool things is you can charge an attorney to designate you. Meaning, if they want to designate you as their expert, I charge $1,000 for them to use my name. And if the case goes any further, and then they need to retain my services further, then there's additional fees and monies and so forth that go into it. But it is kind of a odd thing to just someone wants to put your name on a piece of paper, and you charge them $1,000 essentially.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you're kind of like the intimidator, so to speak, right? They pay you $1,000 to do like level 1 intimidation. So you've been in a lot of court cases. You've sworn me to never say that number, but you've been in more court cases than on this hand and both of these hands 10 times over. So but what happens is you've built your credibility, right? So you've built yourself as a real true expert. So I mean, like any attorney can name anybody as an expert. The problem is, has that person been what's called qualified, which means you've passed the scrutiny test, which means essentially, the first few times you're listed as an expert, if those cases don't settle immediately, at some point the other side is going to oppose your person as being an expert, and then you have to go sit in a little hearing before the judge, and you have to argue why you're an expert, and then the other side argues why you're a complete goon. And then the judge makes a decision whether you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be standing up there giving an expert testimony. And then the judge will say, no, I don't believe this person qualifies as an expert. That could hurt. Or the judge says, yes, I believe this person. I mean, clearly he's been doing mortgages for 20 years and has seen 10,000 credit reports. This guy qualifies as an expert. So once you become qualified, then you start to get cases, and then you start to really build your credibility and your brand and your reputation. And so that's kind of where you're at the point now where it's like an attorney can come to you and they're needing a little bit of ammunition, but they don't want to pay you a whole bunch of money. But they're like, look, let me pay you $1,000 just to list you as an expert to see if that helps to get the deal done. Because the other side may see that and be like, well, okay, we're not feeling like super strong, and this attorney's got Doug, and I mean, we know who Doug is, and we don't want to really go up against all that. And then if they're not intimidated by it and the other facts, if it goes forward, then you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm here for additional hire for service for you, Mr. Attorney. You got to use my name for $1,000, and the other side didn't care. So now, do you need me to do additional work, right? So first of all, Doug, am I kind of on point as far as my general description there of what we just talked about?
Yeah, I to a certain extent, I think there's also another maybe perspective to look at that on, is that one of the tactics might be to sort of take me off the table for the other side, right? So if I pay Doug $1,000, now the other side can't hire him.
It's like those big giant corporations, like having like every good law firm in the United States on retainer. So the poor victims that they're killing with their products can't really actually hire good counsel. I mean, similar kind of a concept, right? We're joking here, guys, but not really. So okay, so they may pay you $1,000 to take you off the table before the other side scoops you up as an expert. Okay, so I mean, there's a little fear of loss, perhaps, from the attorney why they may want to hire you. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think I obviously not being an attorney, but it could be a tactical move, right? In order to sort of make it so that I can't testify for the other side. Yeah. But I also agree with you. I think it also can be a situation where the other side may know me, or I've been on cases opposing their side in other cases. And so, as to your point, does that whole scenario play itself out? Meaning, I'm designated, the other side knows who I am. They look at the facts in the case. Okay, maybe they settle sooner, or maybe they make a better offer than they had did they offer 10 grand to start? Well, okay, now maybe they offer 35 or 40 grand to settle the case instead of having to get further into it and do hire the experts and have reports and have depositions and start running up all these bills, right? I can't speak for the attorneys on each case and all these different scenarios, but I think in general, when you're working as an expert and you're on these cases, always I try to tend to look at it from one of the perspectives that I see it through is that it's a negotiation, right? And as you're venturing through this negotiation process, meaning the litigation and the case itself, well, the designation might be the first step to get somebody to the negotiating table. Well, if that didn't work, well, okay, now we're going to hire him and he's going to do a report. And okay, so now the report says you definitely screwed up and you owe this guy or this person $200,000. Well, okay, now you have a number attached to it and more leverage. Okay, so does the other side now want to question what's inside that report and challenge the validity of it or the methodologies that are being used to calculate those numbers?
Let's touch on some of those things. So let's talk about the expert report, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because I think that's really important. There is that National Consumer Law Center, the NCLC. They've got their digital law library. Everybody who's kind of watching this, that I'm a big fan of that. I've bought my first of their books, the Fair Credit Reporting book, which if you haven't heard of them, just Google NCLC Fair Credit Reporting book, and you can buy it online. Or let me know. I've got some other ways for you to try to get access to that as well. But they've got a digital library. But they've got this whole series of law books, and one is like a big giant 1,000-page document on the FCRA, which explains the law. It has all the court cases, the precedents. When I first read that in 2009, I was like, wow, mind blown. Like an entire book on the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, I mean, you deal with a lot of things other than the FCRA per se. I mean, you deal with a lot of creditor issues that are more like maybe they just kind of screwed the consumer, allegedly, not really credit reporting per se, but calculations of interest or denials of loan, things that aren't really credit per se. But I mean, the point is when you go and do these reports, you've got to be able, I mean, to be an expert, you can't just, get past the first judge where he says you're qualified and then you can't fumble the ball every time after that. You have to be able to hold your own. So you have to be able to have research material. You have to be able to articulate in these reports and back up with some sort of a factual basis why it is that as an expert you feel the way that you feel. I mean, you can't just say, well, my gut instinct tells me XYZ. I mean, although I guess you could. My instinct tells me, and oh, by the way, Judge, not only does my instinct tell me, also all of these sources here that I'm going to reference tell you, right? I mean, but you have to be able to back up with some sort of a factual basis what the hell is going on. That's really where this thing ties to credit repair. I mean, if you're doing anything pre-litigation way, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do credit repair, and a lot of people that do a lot of hope and prayer and things like that. I don't really like the hope and pray. I mean, I do, but not really when it comes to credit repair. I like to kind of have a strategy, which is knowing what you're doing, looking at it. And I'm not sitting here saying anybody as a CRO should do the unlicensed practice of law. Absolutely not. I don't quote case laws, don't even quote the law, but I'll lay out the facts, right? In plain English, here's the facts, this is wrong and this is wrong, or, whatever. By having the access to that material, the law books and the other resources, you're able to articulate really good arguments to these people. And people are probably saying, well, Stephen, yeah, that's great. But when you send stuff to the credit bureaus, they wipe their ass with it. And that's all true. But also you can send stuff to the furnishers, right? And that's where there's a lot of power in the credit repair world, is sending letters to the furnishers, and especially escalating them up to their executives. They're going to have real intelligent people. I mean, not all the time, but you have a high chance of somebody, if you can write well-crafted letters, actually reading this thing. Whereas, yeah, we all know if you send stuff to the bureaus, I mean, there's a very limited chance you can get into their escalations department. But there's only a few things that are going to trigger you going to their escalations department. So for the average credit repair thing, it's just going to get shuffled in the mix, and we all kind of know that. But disputing with the furnishers, you got to, if you can understand how to put good arguments together and not sound super fancy, but actually sound like you know what you're talking about. I think that's kind of the bridge right there between being able to do pre-lit credit repair and what you need to do, because you need to be able to put well-crafted arguments together and back them up. So would you kind of agree with that, or would you disagree with kind of the mutual connection there?
Yeah, I would say it the way I would probably communicate it would be, if you have an opinion about a situation, you just need to be able to support your opinion with, some factual data, some personal experience, work experience. And like you said, you may pull out some case information, or you may pull out something from the Metro 2 format, right, from the resource guide. um, I at times will pull information from the Fannie Mae guideline, mortgage underwriting guidelines, to apply. And like, when you say credit, so keep in mind, when we're talking about credit, you're using it. I'm just going to sort of say this. You're saying it in the context of CROs. When I hear the word credit, it has this much broader interpretation, meaning if you're denied credit, don't get a credit card. Your credit capacity is reduced. Let's say something shows up on your credit report, and now instead of a $20,000 line, you have $1,000 line that they cut you down to. So you've had this $19,000 in credit reduction or credit capacity.
Let's talk about that real quick. I mean, because I hear that is, boy, you want to get some people fuming, chop their credit lines down, and that'll
Right.
get them fuming. And I mean, the practical effect of that is, to your point, if you've got a $20,000 credit line with $1,000 balance charged on there, you're only like 5% utilized. If the creditor chops you down to $1,000 limit, now you're 100% utilized. That's going to drop your score, because all the score knows is algorithms. And if you're 100% utilized, it's like, oh, well, why is Mr. Miner maxed out on his card? Can't he pay his bills? Because if he could pay his bills, he wouldn't need to max out the card. That's how the algorithm looks at it. So look at this. We got love coming in. You just basically struck on the gold there. And so I mean, I've always kind of been of the opinion that, like, too bad, so sad. I mean, as long as they're not discriminating against Doug Miner, but if they look at their portfolio and they're doing risk-based pricing, which is what these credit card companies do, and they're like, okay, all people that kind of fall within this risk bucket,
Yeah.
we're going to make the same decision across the board. We don't really, it's not our problem. We don't create the credit scores. We're Capital One. We don't give a rat's ass about Bank of America or anything else. We're Capital One, and this guy's got a credit card. We're risk-based pricing, and he signed off to it on the agreement, which we can never prove to him that he's even got an agreement. But we're going to chop them all down in this bucket. So let's talk about that, Doug, real quick here, because you just basically hit on the hot button there. Can people actually litigate, or is it kind of like tied into some other things? Because I always thought you really couldn't litigate. I mean, too bad, so sad. They chopped you down. Nothing you can do.
Well, so think about it from the standpoint of, when I'm evaluating the impact of some reporting on someone's credit report. Well, so if somebody initiates a wrongful foreclosure, now your Capital Ones, your credit card companies, charge cards, do account reviews, and they see this foreclosure on there, and your scores drop from being 800, now you're 620. Well, what are they going to do? Exactly what we just said. Your $20,000 line is now $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever the balance is that's left on the account, right? And so the exact thing that you just said happened. You went from a 5% utilization to 100% overnight. So what does that do to your score? Obviously, it's individual specific, but you're going to see, in my experience, you could see as little as a 20-point move, but you could see as much as up to a 50-point move, maybe even more, depending upon where the score was. So, and then it's this sort of snowball effect. So in evaluating the impact of someone reporting something inaccurately that's derogatory and is materially impacting their credit profile and their credit score at the same time, yes, that's what I do. That's part of what I do in the job. It's like saying, hey, look, we're suing you because you started a wrongful foreclosure, because here's proof I've made every single payment. You've accepted every single payment every single month for the last 20 years, right? Why did all of a sudden you start a foreclosure process? I mean,
So,
I'm
so
making it.
really, so really, if I'm hearing you, okay, so you're not really going to be litigating against the credit card company that chopped you down. You're really looking at the snowball. So what's the thing that started the snowball? That was the creditor that did a wrongful foreclosure. So you're going to hold that person liable because they had no right to foreclose, but because they did a wrongful foreclosure, and then it hit the credit report as foreclosure process started. Of course, now we know that all these credit companies do have the right under the FCRA to pull your credit for account reviews. They are risk-based pricing. They are open-ended, credit cards. So they're gonna be like, oh, well, look, Mr. Miner's irresponsible. He can't pay his bills. He's got a foreclosure process started. I mean, why are we going to give him $19,000 in available credit? We're going to chop him down to $1,000. So you're not really going to litigate against the credit card company that chopped it down, but you're going to use that to demonstrate damages and add that to the creditor that initiated the wrongful foreclosure. Is that kind of what I'm hearing from you?
Under this example, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely. But
Have you had examples where you'll actually, I mean, you can actually hold credit card companies liable for just making big giant portfolio decisions and chopping down credit lines, or is that not really something you see very much?
So I think the way you're phrasing that question, it's like, do I see them doing this across the board in some class action lawsuit where they've done something wrong? Not necessarily.
No, like, I mean, if Capital One looks at their portfolio and then there's a whole bucket of consumers that fall into this one bucket, and they're like, okay, well, we want to reduce our risk, our exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to reduce all these people to, if you have 90% available credit, we want to reduce them down to only having 10% more available credit than what they have. If they if they chop all the limits down, I mean, they're not discriminating against Doug Miner, you know what I mean? But if you fall into these buckets that they have, if they reevaluate and reassess these buckets, do you really see lawsuits against Capital One as an example because, oh, they chopped me from 20,000 to 1,000? Or is it all in relation to how kind of like that chopping really originated with somebody else actually doing a real wrong thing that damaged the client?
I guess I have a few different thoughts and viewpoints on it. When you said that, I sort of think back to the financial crisis. Let's say 2008. A lot of the large credit card companies, let's say Capital One and many others, they started canceling cards, reducing limits because there's this big financial crisis. They don't want to have this huge, everybody running up their credit cards and not being able to pay them, right? So what did they do? They started closing lots of accounts, and there was a huge reduction in available credit and a larger number of closed accounts during that time. But then as we started to come out of the financial crisis, what happened? These companies now had reduced profitability, reduced income, right? Because there was less credit out there being used because they had reduced the amount of credit available. So then they had to go back and start, issuing more credit cards to get their volumes back up. To your point, I think you're asking the question, have I seen litigation where because of some large credit card company reducing limits or canceling out cards, litigation against them for the impact that may have on someone's credit? The answer is no. But have I seen cases where a credit card issuer has potentially reported something inaccurately that has caused that same snowball effect that we talked about from the foreclosure? Absolutely, I've seen that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there cases that go from a consumer directly against a credit card issuer? Absolutely. Sure. It's gonna go directly to how they reported certain information under certain circumstances, and did they make a mistake that materially harmed the person? And I guess I would say it this way. I'm going to overgeneralize, but think about it this way. It takes a lot to start, get involved with a litigation. It's not inexpensive. Hiring attorneys, getting involved in litigation is it's not like going to the grocery store. It's not some simple process in the sense that, so I look at it like if it's gotten to the point where they're hiring me, whatever's gone on is probably pretty serious. why are people? I mean, I don't know. I've heard the term frivolous lawsuits thrown around. Um, I don't know that I've been involved in any frivolous lawsuits. I feel like the cases that I've been involved in, there's been actual facts and information that needs to be evaluated, and um,
Dude, as long as the attorney's paying you, they are all legitimate lawsuits. Huh, Doug Miner? I like your style, man. If their money is green, you're giving a legitimate expert report, man. I like what you're saying over there, right? It's kind of like when our clients come to us. I don't really care what your story is. If you can pay us and you're currently paying everybody else, it don't
well, I
matter
don't
what happened.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that for myself. I'm sure there's been cases where I haven't taken them, and I know there's cases that I haven't taken on. Just they didn't add up to me
Right.
for whatever reason, right?
Yeah. So
Uh,
awesome, awesome, awesome.
dude, you kind of lead me into kind of the last thing, right? It's like, look, being an expert witness, you don't have to take every case. You don't have to take on every customer that comes to you or every law firm that calls you, right? If the case doesn't seem right, or you don't feel comfortable with the facts, or let's say the attorneys have communicated the type of testimony that they're looking for, but you don't feel that that's something that you can provide, then it's probably a good idea not to take the case. You
Kind of
know,
like the OJ Simpson type scenario. It's kind of like, look,
are you
I
going with
mean,
the?
I'm
Oh
I'm just
no.
needing me an attorney who can kind of overlook the fact pattern and just get me not guilty. Oh yeah, we've got the old if it doesn't fit, it must acquit at our law firm trick. We'll hire you, right? So
Oh,
yeah, so
Steven.
they
Oh,
come to you, they come expert shop, and they're like, we need the credit expert who can make these guilty people look not guilty. And Doug's like, oh, I got the trick for you guys. Yeah, I'm up for hire. Again, this is all a joke here in case anybody on the other side wants to pull this record. This is just purely an entertainment show. There's nothing factual at all about what's going on here. So, legal
yeah,
disclaimer for you, Doug Miner. Don't want to
cool.
get you don't want to get you booted out of being an expert professional. So
Yeah,
but no, I mean it's all fun and games. We have good times here, but it's all kind of serious because we are all business professionals looking for ways to look at things different ways to be able to hone our craft. And again, I mean, if you've looked at hundreds and thousands of credit reports, I mean, you're an expert in some form or fashion, one way somehow, right? I mean, so how can you take that, look at your business, look at your clients? To Doug's point, he doesn't take all clients. We don't need to take all clients. I mean, that's sometimes is how CROs get ourselves into trouble is we take people who we know probably should not have taken, right? So that being said, man, this has been a good show. I mean, I don't see any other questions coming in. We got Marianne. She loves the completely non-factual humor show over here. This is like a reality TV show. Nothing here should be taken seriously, but it's for entertainment only, Marianne. So, man, as we wrap this one up, Doug, so, you like to talk to people, you like to help people who are interested in pursuing, learning more about being an expert. It's a passion of yours. How can people get in touch with you, and how can you help folks here watching who may be inspired by what you're saying?
right. Yeah. So best thing to do is what was Doug at dougminer.com is my email. You can go to dougminer.com and send me an email. As far as helping people in the CRO space, and if they're interested, whether it's needing to find a right attorney, or is it something that a case maybe an attorney should talk to, or before they go seek out an attorney, a lot of times people will call me and ask, hey Doug, what do you think this is worth? And they kind of give me an idea, and I can evaluate it and give them a ballpark figure that they might be looking at to see if it's worth their time or their money, kind of, or the trouble. And then as far as like the trainings that I do for people who want to be experts, again, Doug at dougminer.com. They can always, instant message me through Facebook with the group. But just reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. I'm pretty accessible, I would say.
When they come to you and they ask a very sincere question of how much is this thing worth, they also have a very sincere briefcase full of cash, and they open it up and they're like, how much of this are we going to have to take out to make this, how much of this value is this thing worth, Doug, to get you on our team, right? So just like the judge re-election campaign. It's perfectly fine to contribute to their re-election campaigns, right? So yeah, we're just joking here. We're having a good time, but
Yeah.
let's see. All kidding aside, Marianne, what state is Doug in? Doug is in the California Republic, in beautiful. What are you, like Santa? Where you're beautiful beach, Malibu, right? Something like that.
I'm a little north of Malibu. Yeah, on the beach.
Yeah. So he's over in California, which, by the way, I was over in your neck of the woods last month, man. Beautiful weather. I was actually kind of surprised how temperate it was. You know, it was like kind of like the same. You know, like all day and night. It wasn't really super hot and super cold.
Yeah.
So yeah. So DougMiner.com. Feel free to reach out to him. Thanks. You are quite welcome there, Marianne. And of course, for those of you guys who like what we talk about here, I do have a training course where we talk about Metro 2 as an industry standard. We talk about disputing with furnishers. We talk about all things pre-litigation. You can go to creditrepairtrainingcourse.com, and we do give a 30-day free trial. It's just $99 a month after that. We'd love to have you guys step in there. And that being said, again, we appreciate all you guys for watching. We bring this to you all. And Doug, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will see all of you guys on the next episode. You guys take care.
See ya.